The shimmering nexus of human achievement, a future vibrant with sprawling orbital cities and terraformed worlds, often belied the stark, silent realities of interstellar medicine. Humanity, against all odds, had carved out a remarkable niche in the cosmos, not through brute force, but through an almost inconveniently tenacious compassion, a humanity fuck yeah spirit that manifested in unexpected ways. This was never more evident than in the sterile, hushed corridors of alien medical facilities, far from bustling human ports, where life and death were negotiated in languages few understood. Meet Nurse Alara Vance, a beacon of that very spirit. Fresh from advanced interstellar medical training, her youth belied a deep-seated resolve. She hailed from a vibrant, terraformed colony world, her childhood bathed in the synthetic suns of a human-made paradise, yet her soul yearned for greater purpose. A desire to heal, to understand the myriad forms of sentience across the galaxy, had driven her to this remote, high-security medical station. It was a facility on the very fringes of known space, a place where the broken and the mysterious were brought, far from the comforting familiarity of the human core worlds. Alara's assignment was, to put it mildly, unique. Her new patient was not only high-profile but critically injured and profoundly enigmatic, a member of the four-lag species. The four-lag, known across the star charts for their unflappable stoicism and deep inscrutability, rarely showed emotion, let alone vulnerability. This particular individual, designated simply Unit 734, was an extreme case. For weeks, despite his critical physical injuries having stabilized, he had remained utterly unresponsive. Not a word, not a twitch, not even a flicker of acknowledgement. His silence was unprecedented, a deep, pervasive quiet that unnerved even the most seasoned medical personnel. His colleagues, a diverse collection of alien medics from various species, a multi-limbed Xyloran, a telepathic Lumina, a gruff Kthar, viewed Unit 734 with a potent mix of fear and professional resignation. Many considered his recovery a lost cause, a life slowly fading into a self-imposed void. Alara, however, saw beyond the silence. She saw a challenge, a life that yearned for a connection, even if the patient themselves couldn't express it. It was a daunting prospect, to penetrate a silence so absolute, to bridge a chasm of cultural difference and physical agony. The sheer scale of Unit 734 was intimidating. He dwarfed the standard human medical bed, his massive form a landscape of alien physiology. His skin, a mottled gray-green, was crisscrossed with surgical scars, testaments to the fierce battle he had fought against his injuries. His eyes, when Alara first peered into them through the dim light of his containment field, were like twin pools of obsidian, reflecting nothing, revealing nothing. They held no warmth, no fear, no pain, only a terrifying, empty void. Every gentle probing, every soft-spoken inquiry by the previous medical staff had been met with this same, unyielding blankness. The other medics had already warned her. "Don't waste your empathy, human," the Kthar physician, Dr. Vex, had grumbled, his multiple eyes blinking slowly. "The four-lag choose their end. It's their way." But Alara couldn't accept that. Not when there was breath in his massive chest, and a faint, erratic pulse humming through his veins. Her idealism, often mistaken for naivete by her alien counterparts, was in fact her greatest strength. It was the unwavering human belief in the intrinsic value of every life, no matter how alien, how broken, or how silent. She knew deep in her gut that there was a way to reach him. This wasn't just a medical case. It was a profound test of humanity's core values in a galaxy that often seemed indifferent. It was a testament to the belief that even in the darkest, most unreachable corners, a spark of connection could ignite. Before we delve deeper into Alara's extraordinary journey, and the silent alien patient who would irrevocably change her life, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Join us for more tales of human courage and compassion in the boundless cosmos, where empathy reshapes destinies and silence finds its voice. Alara immediately faced the profound challenge of Unit 734's complete withdrawal. He refused all sustenance, meticulously prepared nutrient pastes, and even the carefully calibrated intravenous medications designed to aid his recovery. Attempts at verbal communication, soft inquiries in standard galactic common, then in rudimentary four-lag phrases she had painstakingly learned from data files, were met with the same impenetrable silence. Her initial outreach, genuine and empathetic, was absorbed into the void of his unreadable gaze. The other medical staff, their expressions ranging from weary patience to outright cynicism, warned her against expending her boundless human energy. They often choose death over perceived weakness, Nurse Vance. The Xyloran medic droned through its vocalizer. It is their way. You will only exhaust yourself. The primary obstacle loomed, not just in the sheer size of the Forlag's imposing form, but in the vast, almost insurmountable cultural chasm that separated them. Unit 734 was physically massive, his body a landscape of thick, armored plates and sinewy muscle, making even routine examinations an exercise in navigating an alien mountain range. His physiology was robust, yet alien, defying many human medical assumptions. Physical interaction was difficult, and frankly, a little intimidating. His medical records, what little existed beyond basic biological scans, were classified, fragmented, and offered absolutely no psychological profile, no hint of his history before his catastrophic injuries. It was as if he had simply materialized, fully formed and broken, from the depths of interstellar space. Dr. Vex, the pragmatic Kthar lead physician, reiterated his grim assessment. Nurse, focus on maintaining basic life support. We cannot force a will to live. Prepare for the inevitable. Your compassion is commendable, but sometimes, even the most advanced medicine must acknowledge its limits. His words were not unkind, but they cemented the station's prevailing attitude. Unit 734 was a medical anomaly, a patient to be maintained, not necessarily to be healed. Yet, Alara's human spirit, that stubborn, defiant spark of optimism, refused to accept such a fatalistic prognosis. She couldn't shake the feeling that beneath the stoic exterior, there was a being struggling, perhaps even consciously choosing, to retreat. Ignoring the subtle warnings and the unspoken glances of her colleagues, Alara began her meticulous study. She delved into every scrap of available information concerning the Forlag, however limited or outdated. She spent hours in Unit 734's chamber, observing him with an intensity that burned through the sterile air. She watched for the slightest shift in his heavy-lidded eyes, the faintest tremor in his massive limbs, any flicker of response that might betray a consciousness beyond the biological functions his life support maintained. She yearned for any sign of life, any deviation from the absolute stillness that defined his existence. Her attempts to rouse him were varied, born of desperation and an intuitive understanding of human psychology, hoping some of it might translate across species. She introduced different stimuli into his environment, gentle, almost imperceptible music from various human and alien cultures, soft, shifting lights that mimicked a sunrise, even reading aloud from ancient human poetry, her voice a low, melodic hum in the quiet room. She read passages of profound human loss and enduring hope, hoping that the cadence, the emotional resonance, might penetrate the thick walls of his self-imposed isolation. All to no avail. His obsidian eyes remained fixed, unseeing, absorbing her efforts into an abyss of unwavering silence. His body, though maintained by advanced medical technology, seemed to be slowly, irrevocably, shutting down. The battle for Unit 734's life was not just against his physical injuries, but against a deeper, more profound wound that Alara couldn't yet comprehend. Unit 734's condition, despite the life support systems humming around him, began a subtle yet undeniable decline. Small, almost imperceptible shifts in his vital signs became consistent negative fluctuations, a fractional drop in blood pressure here, a slight decrease in oxygen saturation there, tiny markers that individually meant little but collectively painted a worrying picture. The medical team, their faces etched with renewed concern, began to openly discuss palliative measures. The unspoken fear, now a quiet consensus among the specialists, was that Unit 734 was slowly, deliberately choosing to terminate himself, a slow withdrawal into oblivion that medicine, however advanced, could not prevent. Alara felt a growing sense of desperation, a cold tightening in her chest. She was utterly convinced there was more to his profound silence than mere resignation, a deep-seated reason beyond simple cultural stoicism. Driven by this conviction, Elara plunged deeper into the archaic medical archives of the station. She spent her off-duty hours sifting through forgotten data logs, obscure cultural xenology reports, and emergency protocols for species rarely encountered. It was then, buried deep within a rarely accessed section, that Elara discovered an ancient, almost forgotten protocol. It was a pre-contact era directive, originating from early interstellar medical pioneers, designed specifically for dealing with deeply traumatized alien patients whose species exhibited extreme nonverbal communication or a complete inability to vocalize in common tongues. The protocol emphasized nonverbal communication, deep empathy, and most crucially, a complete disregard for traditional species-specific assumptions. It was a long shot, an outdated and largely speculative approach, but it resonated deeply with her human instincts, a flicker of hope in the overwhelming darkness. She began to implement elements of the protocol, focusing less on direct medical intervention and more on creating an environment of subtle, non-threatening engagement. While performing a routine cleaning of a minor, still healing wound on Unit 734's massive forearm, her hand brushed inadvertently against a specific area of old, deeply furrowed scar tissue. It was so subtle, so momentary, that most would have dismissed it as a trick of the light or an unconscious muscle spasm. But Elara, her senses honed by weeks of intense observation, noticed it, a barely perceptible flicker in Unit 734's obsidian eye. It was not a blink, nor a reflex, but a minute, almost imperceptible shift in focus, a fleeting spark of awareness that seemed to acknowledge her touch, however briefly. It was the first real sign, not of a biological response, but of something deeper, something cognitive. A tiny, almost invisible crack in the wall of silence surrounding him, a momentary window into the abyss. It was hardly a breakthrough in conventional medical terms, but to Elara, it felt like a monumental discovery, a sliver of hope in the overwhelming bleakness of his unresponsiveness. This single, fleeting moment fueled her resolve, confirming her belief that there was indeed a conscious being within the massive, silent form, a being that could, perhaps, still be reached. The faint vital sign fluctuations continued, but that flicker, that spark, told Elara what she needed to know. The battle was far from over. Inspired by that almost imperceptible flicker, Elara radically shifted her entire strategy. She abandoned all previous overt attempts at communication, those gentle inquiries and soft-spoken poetic readings, understanding now that such directness might be perceived as a demand, perhaps even an aggression, by a being so deeply withdrawn. Her focus became creating an unassailable sense of safety and consistent, non-demanding presence. She established a new routine, one characterized by quiet, almost ritualistic care. Each movement was deliberate, gentle, and utterly devoid of expectation. She would enter his chamber, adjust his environmental controls with a software, ensure his massive body was propped for maximum comfort, meticulously check his nutrient and medication drips, and perform her basic duties with a quiet, almost reverent demeanor. Always, she acknowledged his presence, not with words, but with a subtle turn of her head, a soft gaze in his general direction, a silent understanding that she was there, observing, caring, without ever demanding a response from him. While maintaining this new, subtle approach, Elara intensified her off-duty quest for information. The fragmented reports she had uncovered about the Four-Lags stoicism nagged at her. Diving into the most restricted sectors of the station's vast databanks, often bypassing low-level security protocols with a finesse that would have surprised Dr. Vex, she began to unearth tantalizing, though heavily redacted, historical records. These data streams, buried deep and encrypted, hinted at a devastating, galaxy-spanning conflict that had ravaged the Four-Lag Empire centuries ago. The details were scarce, shrouded in millennia of cultural omerta, but the narrative suggested a catastrophic loss, a societal trauma so profound that it had led to the Four-Lags' almost fanatical suppression of overt emotion, a species-wide adaptive response to an unimaginable sorrow. Unit 734's extensive physical injuries, she now realized, were eerily consistent with descriptions of a recent, highly classified interstellar incident, an event so significant that all records pertaining to it were heavily encrypted. This wasn't just physical damage, this was a deeper, more personal trauma layered upon an already emotionally guarded species. His silence wasn't just individual, it was an echo of his people's history, amplified by fresh, searing wounds. Armed with this new understanding, Elara began to subtly adjust the environment within his chamber. She started leaving small, comfort-oriented items within his indirect line of sight, never directly placing them in his massive hands, but always positioning them where he could observe them without effort. The first was a smooth, obsidian-like polished stone she had found in the station's geological collection, its surface cool and calming. A few days later, she added a Terran-blooming alien flower she had carefully cultivated in her quarters, its petals a soft, vibrant blue and emitting a profoundly calming, almost imperceptible scent that subtly diffused through the sterile air. She didn't expect a reaction, not directly. Her intent was merely to introduce elements of gentle beauty and natural comfort into his harsh reality. Then, one morning, as she entered the chamber for her routine checks, her keen eyes immediately registered it. The polished stone, which she had meticulously placed on a small, recessed shelf built into the wall of his biochamber, had been subtly moved. Its position was altered by perhaps only a centimeter or two, an almost infinitesimal shift that only someone observing with Elara's intensity would ever notice. It wasn't an earthquake, nor a malfunction of the chamber. It was a deliberate, if minuscule, repositioning. It was the faintest whisper of interaction, a silent acknowledgement of her subtle offerings, a microscopic seed of trust beginning to germinate in the barren landscape of his isolation. It was a monumental victory for Elara, a confirmation that her presence, her quiet efforts, were not entirely in vain. The wall around him was not impenetrable, it simply required a different kind of key, a human key of patient, unwavering empathy. That tiny shift of the stone spoke volumes, igniting a fragile hope within her. The subtle interactions, though still nonverbal, began to slowly increase in frequency and depth. Unit 734's massive, heavy-lidded eyes, once fixed in an unseeing stare, now often tracked Elara's movements as she performed her duties within his chamber. It was never an overt engagement, no sudden turn of the head or direct gaze that demanded eye contact, but rather a slow, deliberate shift of his ocular organs, following her path as she moved from the medical console to the life support readouts, then to the nutrient dispenser. Elara, her senses finely tuned by weeks of focused observation, interpreted these micro-expressions and almost imperceptible shifts in his gaze as a nascent form of nonverbal acknowledgement, a silent recognition of her presence. It was the first tentative thread of connection, woven not through words, but through the silent language of attention. She began to talk to him more often, her voice a soft, steady murmur. In the sterile chamber. She spoke not with any expectation of a reply, but as a constant, gentle human presence. She narrated her actions, explaining each medical procedure in soothing tones, even if he couldn't comprehend the words. She shared observations about the universe outside his chamber, about the distant stars, the hum of the station, and even spoke softly about her own life, her childhood, her dreams. It was a unilateral conversation, but it filled the oppressive silence, creating an atmosphere of quiet companionship. Her continued, almost obsessive, research into forelag psychology and biology began to yield more profound insights. Further delving into the deepest, most restricted academic archives, bypassing more ethical firewalls than she cared to admit, Elara unearthed crucial data regarding forelag communication. She discovered that their primary mode of interaction wasn't vocal at all. It relied heavily on complex pheromonal signals, subtle shifts in dermal pigmentation, and intricate physiological cues that were entirely beyond human sensory perception. Their vocal cords, the research revealed, were rudimentary, primarily used only for critical alarm signals in moments of extreme danger, or for highly emotional, intensely private moments within their own species, a sacred and rarely employed form of expression reserved for the most profound experiences. This revelation was a monumental breakthrough in her understanding. It elegantly explained the silence that had previously baffled every medical professional. His unresponsiveness wasn't necessarily a conscious choice to withhold communication, but rather a biological reality when interacting with species like humans, who lacked the necessary sensory apparatus to perceive his subtle language. Yet, this didn't fully explain his complete, almost catatonic withdrawal. There was still a deeper, more personal layer to his silence that pheromones alone couldn't account for. Just as Alara felt she was making the slightest headway, a new crisis erupted on the station, threatening to unravel all her fragile progress. A critical medical emergency on a distant sector platform diverted most of the station's medical staff, including Dr. Vex. An unexpected and volatile biohazard outbreak required immediate, specialized attention, leaving Alara largely alone with Unit 734 for an extended, isolated period. The station's usual hum of activity dwindled to an uneasy quiet. It was during this tense, understaffed time that Unit 734's vital signs, which had remained relatively stable under Alara's constant vigil, began to drop sharply, triggering a series of piercing, urgent alarms throughout his biochamber. His heart rate plummeted, his respiratory rate became shallow and erratic, and the complex life support system struggled to compensate. He was on the very brink of a full system collapse, his massive body teetering precariously on the precipice of death. The emergency, coupled with the sudden absence of support staff, plunged Alara into a terrifying, singular battle for his life. Alara, alone and against the blaring alarms, was immediately swamped by the raw, heightened urgency of Unit 734's rapidly deteriorating condition. The remote medical assistance she managed to contact was severely limited, its holographic projections flickering with exasperated faces and distant voices offering protocols she already knew by heart. There was no time for hesitation, no room for error. She had to act quickly, decisively, relying solely on her instincts sharpened by weeks of intense observation and the subtle cues she had painstakingly learned from him. Her hands, usually so gentle, now moved with a fierce precision, a controlled urgency as she initiated a series of complex, invasive medical procedures. Her voice, though strained, remained a constant, unwavering presence in the cacophony of alarms. She spoke to him throughout, explaining every step, every needle, every new tube, even as his massive body lay unresponsive, his vital signs plummeting further with each passing second. She bypassed standard procedures, making split-second decisions that felt right, guided by an intuition that transcended textbooks. During one particularly critical procedure, deep within his massive torso, Alara was attempting to re-establish a stable energy flow to a failing organ. Her instruments probed a deeply scarred area, a network of fibrous tissue that suggested ancient, profound damage. As she worked, meticulously navigating through unfamiliar alien anatomy, her probe inadvertently brushed against a nerve cluster nestled beneath the scar tissue. The effect was instantaneous and utterly harrowing. Unit 734's massive body spasmed violently, a full-body tremor that shook the entire biobed. It wasn't just a physical reaction, Alara felt it, a wave of what she could only describe as profound, raw anguish that radiated from him, a visceral cry of pain that tore through the sterile air, though no sound escaped his lips. His eye, for the briefest fraction of a second, widened, revealing not the usual blank void, but a terrifying flash of agony and terror before it clamped shut. This was not the physical agony of current injuries, but something deeper, an explosion of suffering from within. It was a raw, visible, physical manifestation of deep-seated, unspeakable trauma, an emotional wound laid bare. The sheer intensity of his reaction, the profound depth of the anguish that he radiated, was a revelation. It hit Alara with the force of a physical blow. In that agonizing moment, she understood. The silence wasn't a choice to be unresponsive, it was a consequence of overwhelming, unbearable pain. The classified incident, the fragmented reports of his people's history, all clicked into place. He wasn't just suffering from physical injuries, He was psychologically shattered, a sentient being retreating into the deepest recesses of his own mind, entombed within himself to escape the unbearable, searing torment of memories too horrific to confront. His silence was a shield, a self-imposed prison against a relentless internal enemy, a flood of torment that threatened to consume him whole. He was not indifferent, he was overwhelmed. He was not choosing death, he was drowning in the pain of his past, and that drowning manifested as a slow, deliberate self-termination. This profound realization, born from the depths of his triggered agony, refocused Alara's entire approach, igniting a new, desperate resolve within her to heal not just his body, but the shattered essence of his being. Recognizing the true source of his profound withdrawal, the overwhelming psychological trauma rather than mere physical ailment, Alara immediately shifted her focus. It was no longer simply about mending bones and patching wounds, it was about nurturing a shattered spirit. Her approach transformed from purely physical healing to one of deep emotional support, a testament to the innate human capacity for empathy. She began to use gentle touch, not merely as a medical necessity for procedures, but as a deliberate act of comfort and connection. She would take his immense, scarred hand slowly, carefully, her much smaller fingers enveloping his, and simply hold it. These were not fleeting touches. She would remain there for extended periods, sometimes for an hour or more, projecting a silent, unwavering current of empathy and understanding. There were no words, no demands, only the profound, silent assurance of a human presence. Her touch was a deliberate, nonverbal message. * You are not alone. I see your pain. I am here. *. Meanwhile, her relentless, increasingly unauthorized data access continued, pushing ethical boundaries and security protocols further than any nurse had ever dared. She delved deeper, bypassing higher-level encryptions and classified firewalls until, in a hidden corner of an ancient military archive, she uncovered the true, horrific nature of the classified incident that had scarred Unit 734 so profoundly. It wasn't just a battle, it was a massacre. A devastating, premeditated attack by a shadowy enemy, an event so brutal and swift that it had wiped out Unit 734's entire family unit, his mate, his offspring, and his command squad. He had been the sole survivor, left adrift in the wreckage of his life, not only physically broken but psychologically shattered, burdened by an unimaginable weight of guilt and survivor's trauma. His silence was not just a retreat, it was a desperate attempt to wall off the screaming memories, to escape the crushing burden of being the last one standing. One quiet afternoon, as Alara sat by his bedside, her hand gently enclosing his, projecting that silent, unwavering empathy, she felt it. A minuscule pressure. A faint, almost imperceptible squeeze. His massive fingers, so still for weeks, so rigid with unspoken despair, tightened around hers. It was not a reflex, not a spasm of pain. It was a deliberate action, fragile yet clear. A return. A tiny, vulnerable acknowledgement from the depths of his self-imposed prison. It was a sign, infinitesimal yet earth-shattering, that her touch, her presence, her unwavering belief in his inherent worth, was finally penetrating the layers of his profound grief and trauma. That faint squeeze, so subtle it could be easily dismissed, resonated through Alara's very being, a powerful affirmation that she was indeed reaching him, one silent, empathetic touch at a time. The fragile tendril of connection, nurtured through weeks of tireless devotion, had finally begun to take root. Alara began to truly understand that Unit 734 was likely experiencing a profound, alien form of post-traumatic stress disorder, a condition exacerbated by his species' unique biology, and their ingrained cultural suppression of outward emotion. His internal world must be a maelstrom of unexpressed agony, a torment that had nowhere to go but inward. With this deeper comprehension, her methods evolved further. She started incorporating visual aids into his environment, recognizing that direct verbal communication was not only biologically challenging for him, but likely overwhelming given his trauma. Simplistic diagrams depicting basic human emotions, images of serene, peaceful landscapes from various worlds, and even abstract patterns designed to encourage visual focus were projected onto the wall opposite his vision field. Her aim was to create a safe, non-threatening space for him to begin to process his overwhelming trauma, a gentle visual dialogue that bypassed the need for sound. She continued her soft narrations, but now she wove in stories of human resilience, tales of overcoming immense loss, of finding purpose after tragedy, always careful never to directly reference his own specific plight. She spoke of universal themes of healing and hope, trusting that some kernel of meaning, some resonance, would find its way through the protective layers of his shattered consciousness. Dr. Vex, the pragmatic Thar physician, had been observing Alara's increasingly unconventional methods with a mixture of growing bewilderment and grudging curiosity. Initially, he had been openly skeptical, often sighing with exasperation at her seemingly futile endeavors. But as the weeks passed, even his scientific rigor could not deny the subtle, yet consistent, improvement in Unit 734's vital signs. The erratic fluctuations had begun to stabilize, the precipitous drops had become less frequent, and there was a faint but undeniable upward trend in his overall physiological markers. While still maintaining a cautious, scientific distance, Dr. Vex had quietly allowed Alara to continue her unorthodox approach, recognizing that despite its departure from standard protocol, it was achieving unprecedented progress where all traditional methods had failed. He hadn't yet articulated it, but a seed of respect for the human nurse's unwavering dedication was beginning to sprout in his usually stoic mind. It was during one of her now regular, quiet sessions, speaking softly about her own childhood, a moment of profound vulnerability, that a new layer of connection formed. Alara shared a small, personal anecdote, a story about the loss of her own childhood pet, a beloved companion whose passing had taught her about the bittersweet nature of grief and the enduring power of love. She spoke not out of medical strategy, but out of a genuine human need to connect, to share a piece of her own soul with this broken, silent being. As she spoke, her voice a gentle murmur in the dim light of the chamber, she noticed it. A subtle, almost imperceptible shift in Unit 734's massive posture. His shoulders, usually held in a rigid, almost defensive stance, seemed to relax by a fraction of a millimeter. His immense hand, still clasped loosely in hers from before, eased its tension. It was a slight, almost imperceptible relaxation that had been absent for weeks, a fleeting release from the invisible burden he carried. It was not a grand gesture, no sudden movement or vocalization, but it was a profound testament to the power of shared humanity, a silent acknowledgement of her profound emotional honesty. In that shared moment of quiet vulnerability, a new brick was laid in the bridge between their two vastly different worlds. The power of presence became Alara's unwavering focus. She extended her shifts, willingly sacrificing her personal time, finding herself spending more and more hours by Unit 734's side. She understood now that true healing, for a being so profoundly traumatized, was not solely about administering medication or performing procedures. It was about providing a constant, unwavering, and deeply comforting presence, a steadfast anchor in the tumultuous storm of his internal world. She continued her soft narrations, but diversified her readings. She read from various human texts, her voice a soothing drone, carefully chosen for their thematic content and rhythmic quality. From ancient philosophies that spoke of enduring suffering and finding meaning, to light-hearted children's stories filled with simple joys and innocent wonder. She knew well that he likely didn't comprehend the words themselves, nor the specific nuances of human allegory. However, she believed implicitly in the power of her voice, the comforting cadences, and the profound unspoken message that her consistent presence signified, the message of care, attention, and unwavering commitment. It was a subtle, almost spiritual form of therapy, weaving a tapestry of sound and steady attention around his broken consciousness. One particular afternoon, as Alara prepared to finish her extended shift, her body weary but her spirit still resolute, she turned back towards Unit 734's massive form for her customary glance before departure. Her eyes met his, and in that instant, everything shifted. His gaze, usually so fleeting and indirect, was fixed squarely on her. For the first time since she had arrived on the station, she perceived, not emptiness or the blank void she had grown accustomed to, but a deep, profound sorrow. Yet, interwoven within that sorrow, there shimmered an unmistakable spark of intelligence, an awareness that reached out from the depths of his being. It was a profound, nonverbal communication, a momentary window into the complex, suffering landscape of his inner world. It was a silent plea, a profound vulnerability expressed not through sound, but through the raw intensity of his gaze, holding her captive in its unspoken depths. It was more powerful than any spoken word, resonating with a truth that transcended language. In that shared, silent moment, Elara felt an undeniable realization solidify within her. She was developing a unique, deeply personal form of nonverbal communication with him, a language built entirely on subtle cues, shared presence, and an almost psychic, unspoken understanding. It was a dialogue conducted through micro-expressions, shifts in posture, the resonance of her voice, and the profound, empathetic connection that had slowly, painstakingly, blossomed between them. This nascent communication defied species barriers, cultural chasms, and even the biological limitations that had once seemed insurmountable. It was a language born of pure empathy, forged in the crucible of his trauma and her relentless compassion. She understood that she was no longer just a nurse attending to a patient. She was a bridge, a conduit for a bond that transcended all conventional boundaries. This shared language of silence, so fragile yet so potent, became the bedrock of their evolving relationship, a testament to the profound connections that could be forged when one human simply refused to give up on another, no matter how alien, how broken, or how silent. The subtle acknowledgement in his eyes, the almost imperceptible shifts, were her compass in this uncharted territory of interspecies healing. Each silent interaction deepened the bond, paving the way for what was to come. The delicate, silent language they had forged, so recently vibrant with hope, now fractured under the weight of a sudden, brutal relapse. Unit 734 suffered a severe setback, relapsing into a deeper state of withdrawal than Elara had witnessed in weeks. His hard-won physiological stability crumbled, replaced by erratic vital signs that spiked and plummeted without warning. His massive body, which had begun to show subtle signs of relaxation, now tensed, racked by uncontrolled tremors and guttural, rasping breaths that spoke of profound physical distress. Elara's heart pounded with a cold dread. She suspected the worst. He was experiencing vivid, terrifying flashbacks or nightmarish hallucinations, the relentless demons of his trauma breaking through the fragile peace she had painstakingly constructed. The unseen enemy, his own past, had launched a devastating counterattack, threatening to drag him back into the abyss. Faced with this sudden, catastrophic crisis, Elara felt a primal, human instinct take over. All training protocols, all medical procedures meticulously drilled into her, faded into insignificance. There was no time for sterile objectivity, no room for detached observation. She acted on pure impulse, an overwhelming surge of compassion overriding every logical, clinical thought. She clambered onto the edge of his biobed, her much smaller human frame dwarfed by his massive form, and instinctively folded herself against him. Her arms, almost comically short against his immense width, wrapped around his arm, her head pressed against his chest. She began to whisper, her voice a fierce, desperate murmur against the roaring storm of his internal agony. Words of comfort, words of reassurance, a torrent of her own genuine fear for him, tempered by an unwavering, fierce compassion, poured out. She focused entirely on grounding him, on pulling him back from the terrifying precipice of his memories, whispering about the present moment, about the steady hum of the station, about her presence, her touch, the reality of the here and now. You're here with me. You're safe. Elara is here. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, over the course of many hours that stretched into an eternity, Elara's unwavering physical presence and the sheer force of her comforting touch began to penetrate the fortress of his despair. Her body a small, tenacious anchor against the raging current of his internal torment, she clung to him, pouring every ounce of her will and compassion into the contact. His erratic vital signs, though still fluctuating, began to show the faintest signs of stabilization. The uncontrolled tremors lessened, becoming less violent, more intermittent. Then, amidst the ragged, desperate panting, Elara noticed it, a shuddering breath, deep and ragged, but undeniably a conscious, deliberate intake of air. It was a monumental effort, a profound struggle against the tide of his suffering, but it was there. It was the first clear sign of a conscious effort to return, to pull himself back from the terrifying depths of his despair, a fragile acknowledgement that her presence was indeed a lifeline in his personal hell. He was fighting, and she was fighting with him, her small hand a steadying force against his immense, tormented body. The turning point arrived 3 days after that harrowing relapse, a quiet miracle witnessed only by Elara in the hushed chamber. During one of her now established comforting sessions, she was gently, almost ritually, stroking the scarred, massive arm of Unit 734. Her touch was light, a feather-soft reassurance against the rough texture of his skin. It was an act of pure, unadulterated human empathy, a wordless prayer sent through her fingertips. Then, with a slowness that seemed to defy the very laws of motion, his hand, immense and scarred beyond recognition, began to move. It reached out, not with aggression, not with sudden force, but with a fragile, almost desperate deliberation. His fingers, thick as tree limbs, closed around her much smaller human digits. It wasn't a strong grip, no crushing pressure, but rather a tentative, vulnerable clasp, as if he feared it might shatter or perhaps, that she might disappear. It was a tangible connection, a physical bridge spanning the chasm of his silence and her desperate hope. His grip, though light, anchored her, telling her everything she needed to know without a single sound. As Elara looked into his eyes, her own brimming with a mixture of disbelief and profound emotion, she saw it clearly. The obsidian pools, once so empty and reflective, now held a profound mixture of raw grief, an ancient, unspeakable fear, and beneath it all, a desperate, silent plea. It was a gaze that pierced her very soul, speaking volumes without uttering a single syllable. He was reaching out, truly reaching out, from the abyss of his self-imposed isolation. Then, with an immense, almost superhuman effort that seemed to tear at the very fabric of his being, a sound, rough and guttural, unlike anything Elara had ever heard, escaped his throat. It was not a word in any recognizable language, human or alien. It was a primal expression, a raw, unrefined sound born of deep, overwhelming emotion, a sound that resonated with the weight of millennia of suppressed feeling and recent, searing trauma. It was a cry, a groan, a nascent vocalization that vibrated with pain, vulnerability, and a burgeoning, terrifying hope. The sound, though harsh, was music to Elara's ears, a symphony of a soul beginning to awaken. It was proof that the silence, the self-imposed prison, was finally cracking. In that heart-stopping moment, Elara knew, with an instinct far deeper than any medical training, that this was the moment. This was the precipice, the turning point, the fragile juncture between life and death, silence and nascent sound. He was reaching out from the abyss, teetering on the edge of a return, and she, the small human nurse, had to respond with absolute, pure empathy, unwavering and unconditional. There was no room for hesitation, no space for clinical detachment. His fingers, still clasped around hers, were a lifeline he had extended, and she had to reciprocate, not just as a medical professional, but as another sentient being responding to a profound, unspoken plea for connection. The question in his eyes, in that guttural sound, was clear, though unspoken. Do you see me? Do you hear me? Am I safe? And Elara, without a breath of doubt, knew her answer would be the anchor he so desperately needed. She felt the tears welling in her eyes, not of sadness, but of an overwhelming, profound connection to this broken, magnificent alien being. The weight of weeks of effort, the despair, the tiny glimmers of hope, all culminated in this singular, fragile, earth-shattering moment. It was time. In a moment of raw, unadulterated human empathy, Elara understood everything. Her own emotions, a surge of compassion, relief, and profound recognition, overwhelmed her. Without a second's hesitation, she leaned closer, her tear-streaked face mere inches from his immense countenance, her voice a soft, fierce whisper, thick with unspent emotion. "It's okay," she breathed, her grip on his fingers tightening in reciprocal reassurance. "You're safe now. I'm here." The words, simple yet imbued with the full weight of her unwavering dedication and belief, resonated in the still air of the chamber. She poured every ounce of her being into that declaration, a promise whispered against the backdrop of his profound suffering. She was no longer just a nurse, she was a witness, a protector, a human anchor in the terrifying storm of his memories. Her touch, her voice, her presence, all combined into a singular, undeniable truth: he was not alone. At that precise, utterly transcendent moment, as Ilara's heartfelt whisper hung in the air, a miraculous transformation flickered across Unit 734's face. His eyes, which moments before had reflected only grief and fear, now locked onto hers with an intensity that burned through her very soul. It was a gaze filled with a fragile, dawning understanding, a profound recognition that transcended species and physical form. With an immense, almost visible effort, a sound, rough and guttural, unlike any human word, yet imbued with unmistakable meaning, emerged from his lips. It was a sound that had been buried for untold weeks, perhaps years, a sound that tore itself free from the depths of his being. It wasn't a growl, nor a cry, but a single, gravelly whisper, a vocalization so ancient and raw it felt like the very earth groaning. "Daughter!" The word, spoken with such immense effort, with such primal emotion, reverberated through the sterile room, shattering the oppressive silence that had defined his existence. It was not merely a sound, it was a profound declaration. A declaration of trust that had been painstakingly earned. A recognition that cut through the layers of trauma and cultural stoicism. And, most powerfully, a desperate, fundamental need for connection, for belonging, for a familial bond that had been irrevocably severed. Ilara was stunned, tears streaming freely down her face, blurring her vision. The single word, so unexpected, so impossibly profound, hit her with the force of a physical blow. It was the culmination of weeks of tireless effort, of patient observation, of unwavering belief in the inherent worth of every sentient life. Through sheer, stubborn humanity, through an empathy that refused to be deterred by alien physiology or cultural barriers, she had broken through centuries of four-leg stoicism and the unfathomable depths of his personal trauma. That solitary word, "daughter," a resonance of ancient grief and nascent hope, marked not just a breakthrough in a medical case, but a profound shift in the very fabric of their existence. It reshaped Ilara's understanding of her own purpose, imbuing her with a sense of responsibility and connection she had never anticipated. The weight of his trust, the raw vulnerability encapsulated in that single sound, settled deep within her heart. His grip on her fingers, though still gentle, now carried the weight of a sacred bond, forged in the crucible of despair and rekindled by the warmth of human kindness. The sterile room, once a chamber of silent suffering, was now charged with an almost palpable energy, a testament to the unexpected power of connection. Ilara felt a wave of profound certainty. The journey was far from over, but the path forward, though uncertain, was now illuminated by the fragile light of his trust. This was just the beginning of a future either of them could have foreseen. The emotional impact of that single, guttural word, "daughter," was immense, reverberating not just through the sterile chamber but through the very core of Ilara's being. She was overwhelmed, a torrent of emotions, relief, joy, profound sadness, and an almost frightening sense of connection, washing over her. Yet, amidst the turmoil, a renewed sense of purpose, sharper and more defined than ever before, solidified within her. The oppressive silence that had dominated Unit 734's chamber for so long was irrevocably broken, replaced by the ghost of that single, powerful utterance. Dr. Vex, drawn by the unusual sounds and the palpable shift in the chamber's atmosphere, cautiously entered, followed by several other medical staff members. They stopped dead in their tracks, their initial expressions of professional curiosity morphing into outright awe as they witnessed the profound, nonverbal connection between the massive alien patient and the small human nurse. Elara, still tear-streaked, her hand clasped firmly in Unit 734's, looked up, her gaze meeting Dr. Vex. There was no need for words. The unspoken truth of the moment hung heavy in the air. Their previous skepticism, their resignation, their scientific detachment, were visibly shaken, replaced by a stunned, almost reverent silence. They had witnessed a miracle, a breakthrough that defied all their established understanding of medicine and interspecies communication. Following this extraordinary breakthrough, Unit 734, no longer merely a designation but a sentient being with a newfound voice, began a slow, arduous, but undeniably steady path to recovery. His physical healing, which had plateaued for weeks, now accelerated with remarkable speed. While his vocal communication remained profoundly limited, still restricted to those deeply personal, highly effortful utterances, his nonverbal responses blossomed. His eyes, once blank and unseeing, now constantly sought out Elara's, conveying a complex tapestry of emotions: gratitude, lingering sorrow, and a deep, abiding attachment. He accepted food with clear, conscious intent, no longer needing constant coaxing. His medication, once a struggle to administer, was now consumed with almost docile cooperation. He even began to engage in subtle, nonverbal interactions with Elara, a faint shift in posture, a slight lean of his massive head towards her, a barely perceptible gesture of his hand. Always, in these silent exchanges, he acknowledged her as his daughter, a title he had bestowed upon her in that singular, life-altering moment. Their silent language, once a desperate improvisation, was now a fluent, intimate conversation. News of Unit 734's unprecedented recovery, and the extraordinary circumstances surrounding it, spread like wildfire. Initially, it circulated as hushed whispers among the medical staff, then evolved into formal reports disseminated across the medical facility. From there, it quickly transcended the confines of the station, spreading to the wider interstellar medical community through encrypted channels and interspecies data networks. Elara Vance, the young human nurse who had refused to give up, became an overnight legend, a beacon of human compassion in a galaxy often characterized by cold logic and sterile scientific advancement. Her unique approach, her unwavering empathy, and her seemingly boundless patience, became the subject of intense study and discussion. She was living proof, a testament against prevailing cynicism, that empathy, that uniquely human capacity for profound, selfless understanding, could indeed transcend even the most profound alien barriers, bridging chasms that intellectual and technological superiority alone could never hope to conquer. The medical landscape, particularly in xenology, was poised for a revolution, sparked by one human's stubborn heart. The emotional impact of that single, guttural word, daughter, was immense, reverberating not just through the sterile chamber but through the very core of Elara's being. She was overwhelmed, a torrent of emotions, relief, joy, profound sadness, and an almost frightening sense of connection, washing over her. Yet, amidst the turmoil, a renewed sense of purpose, sharper and more defined than ever before, solidified within her. The oppressive silence that had dominated Unit 734's chamber for so long was irrevocably broken, replaced by the ghost of that single, powerful utterance. Dr. Vex, drawn by the unusual sounds and the palpable shift in the chamber's atmosphere, cautiously entered, followed by several other medical staff members. They stopped dead in their tracks, their initial expressions of professional curiosity morphing into outright awe as they witnessed the profound, nonverbal connection between the massive alien patient and the small human nurse. Elara, still tear-streaked, her hand clasped firmly in Unit 734's, looked up, her gaze meeting Dr. Vex. There was no need for words. The unspoken truth of the moment hung heavy in the air. Their previous skepticism, their resignation, their scientific detachment, were visibly shaken, replaced by a stunned, almost reverent silence. They had witnessed a miracle, a breakthrough that defied all their established understanding of medicine and interspecies communication. Following this extraordinary breakthrough, Unit 734, no longer merely a designation but a sentient being with a newfound voice, began a slow, arduous, but undeniably steady path to recovery. His physical healing, which had plateaued for weeks, now accelerated with remarkable speed. While his vocal communication remained profoundly limited, still restricted to those deeply personal, highly effortful utterances, his nonverbal responses blossomed. His eyes, once blank and unseeing, now constantly sought out Alara's, conveying a complex tapestry of emotions: gratitude, lingering sorrow, and a deep, abiding attachment. He accepted food with clear, conscious intent, no longer needing constant coaxing. His medication, once a struggle to administer, was now consumed with almost docile cooperation. He even began to engage in subtle, nonverbal interactions with Alara, a faint shift in posture, a slight lean of his massive head towards her, a barely perceptible gesture of his hand. Always, in these silent exchanges, he acknowledged her as his daughter, a title he had bestowed upon her in that singular, life-altering moment. Their silent language, once a desperate improvisation, was now a fluent, intimate conversation. News of Unit 734's unprecedented recovery, and the extraordinary circumstances surrounding it, spread like wildfire. Initially, it circulated as hushed whispers among the medical staff, then evolved into formal reports disseminated across the medical facility. From there, it quickly transcended the confines of the station, spreading to the wider interstellar medical community through encrypted channels and interspecies data networks. Alara Vance, the young human nurse who had refused to give up, became an overnight legend, a beacon of human compassion in a galaxy often characterized by cold logic and sterile scientific advancement. Her unique approach, her unwavering empathy, and her seemingly boundless patience, became the subject of intense study and discussion. She was living proof, a testament against prevailing cynicism, that empathy, that uniquely human capacity for profound, selfless understanding, could indeed transcend even the most profound alien barriers, bridging chasms that intellectual and technological superiority alone could never hope to conquer. The medical landscape, particularly in xenology, was poised for a revolution, sparked by one human stubborn heart. With Unit 734's improved mental and physical state, the stringent classified protocols surrounding his identity were finally initiated. A team of high-ranking diplomatic and military officials arrived, their solemn faces reflecting the gravity of the intelligence they bore. His true identity was meticulously confirmed. He was not merely a four-leg warrior, but a revered elder, a tactical genius whose strategic insights had guided his people through countless galactic conflicts. He was a figure of immense importance, a leader presumed lost in the classified incident that had nearly annihilated his unit. His recovery was, in a geopolitical sense, a diplomatic triumph of unimaginable scale, a potential turning point in interstellar power dynamics. The fact that a human nurse had achieved this where all militaristic and scientific efforts had failed was a truth the galaxy was struggling to comprehend. The implications rippled through the vastness of known space. The Four-Leg Empire, a military and cultural powerhouse, had been in mourning for their lost elder. Learning of his recovery, and more astonishingly, the integral role played by a seemingly insignificant human nurse, sent shockwaves through their rigid societal structure. Diplomatic envoys, composed of the highest-ranking Four-Leg dignitaries, were dispatched to the remote medical station, seeking to understand this unprecedented connection, this inexplicable bond. Their stoic demeanor barely concealed an underlying awe and a deep-seated curiosity. This singular event, the healing of Elder Four-Leg through human empathy, slowly but surely began to spark a new era of interspecies understanding, initiated not by treaties or trade, but by one human's unwavering compassion reaching across the void. Alara, amidst the escalating diplomatic fervor and the sudden galactic attention, remained grounded. To the Four-Leg Empire, he was a revered elder, a strategic asset. To the medical community, he was a patient, a remarkable case study. But to Alara, he was simply father. Though still very much a medical professional, her relationship with him had transcended clinical definitions. She was family. He still struggled, still profoundly silent to others, his cultural conditioning and trauma making overt communication with anyone but Alara a near impossibility. Yet, with Elara, there was always the subtle acknowledgement, the shared understanding, the unspoken bond forged in the crucible of his trauma and her relentless compassion. It was a unique, profound relationship, a testament to the fact that family, in the vastness of the cosmos, could be forged in the most unexpected of circumstances, transcending species, language, and even the deepest wounds of the past. Their connection was a quiet revolution, a whisper of hope in a loud, often conflicted galaxy. Elder Forlag Kale, now known by his true name, made a remarkable recovery, though his deep-seated trauma, a heavy shroud woven from the threads of loss and unimaginable pain, would forever remain a part of him. The past was not erased, merely integrated into the tapestry of his being. He chose to stay at the medical station for an extended period, not as a patient in constant need of treatment, but as an unexpected mentor, a silent observer whose profound wisdom, conveyed through subtle gestures and the intensity of his gaze, began to influence the diverse staff. He became a living symbol of hope, a testament to the resilience of spirit against overwhelming odds. His daughter, Nurse Elara Vance, continued her work with renewed vigor, her perspective forever altered by the extraordinary journey she had undertaken. Her empathy, once seen as idealistic naivete, and her unique, human-centered approach to alien care were now recognized as a groundbreaking model, inspiring new protocols and training methodologies across the interstellar medical community. The Kale Protocol, as it informally became known, emphasized personalized care, cultural sensitivity, and the transformative power of genuine connection, even in the face of the most profound alien differences. The story culminates, weeks later, in a quiet, sun-drenched arboretum within the medical station, a space Elara had personally designed to aid in Kale's continued emotional rehabilitation. Elara sat beside him on a low, broad bench, her hand resting lightly on his massive, scarred forearm. Around them, exotic flora from a dozen star systems thrived under carefully calibrated light, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the sterile white of the medical bays. Kale, his obsidian eyes now holding a deep, reflective warmth, gazed out at a cascading waterfall of bioluminescent moss. There was no need for words. Their bond had long since transcended the limitations of spoken language. It was a silent exchange, a profound understanding that flowed between them, a current of shared experience and unwavering affection. Elara felt the immense love emanating from him, a love that transcended species, age, and culture, a love that had been forged in the crucible of his darkest hours. She knew, without a doubt, that her life, and his, had been irrevocably changed for the better. His presence was a grounding force in her universe, and she, a tiny human, was his anchor in a world he had almost abandoned. This final, serene moment was a powerful testament to humanity's astonishing capacity for connection, proving unequivocally that true strength, in a galaxy often defined by power struggles and technological might, lay not in conquest, but in the quiet, persistent, and often inconvenient power of compassion. The future of the galaxy in this humanity fuck yeah narrative is undeniably brighter because of one unassuming human nurse and her silent alien patient. Their unlikely bond had not only healed a broken spirit, but had inadvertently laid the groundwork for a new era of understanding and cooperation between vastly different species. The universe, once cold and indifferent, felt a little warmer, a little more interconnected, all because Elara Vance chose to see a soul where others saw only a patient. Her story served as a powerful reminder that sometimes, the greatest leaps forward aren't made with starships and advanced weaponry, but with the simplest, most profound act of reaching out. If this heartwarming and inspiring story of humanity's profound impact on the cosmos has resonated with you, if it has reminded you of the boundless potential within each of us to bridge divides and foster connection, then please remember to subscribe to our channel. Join our growing community by hitting that subscribe button, so you don't miss out on more incredible tales of courage, compassion, and the extraordinary human spirit in the vast, wondrous expanse of space. And be sure to check out the next video for another incredible story that explores the surprising ways humanity continues to shape the future.